Okay, so when we use synthetic division, first of all, synthetic division is only working with binomials, and then also specifically a binomial that has no coefficient in front of your x. So for example, if I were dividing by a 2x, whoops, it's not letting me write for some reason. If I were dividing by, for example, a 2x plus 1, okay, that has a coefficient in front of x squared, synthetic division is not good with that because there's an extra step that you have to do after you do the synthetic division that a lot of people forget about. So I only recommend using synthetic division with a binomial. First of all, that's the only time it works. And then also one that has a coefficient of 1, which in this case it is 1x minus 3. So that's what we're going to divide by. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our divisor. It keeps disappearing. Take that x minus 3, set it equal to 0, and solve for x, okay? What we want to know is what makes that turn to 0. What is the value of x that makes this part right here turn to 0? Again, the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to take that divisor. We're going to come off to the side somewhere. We're going to set it equal to 0, and we're going to solve for x. Okay, so x equals what here? 3. All right, we're going to take that 3 and we're going to put it in a backwards L, a half a box, whatever you want to call it. Okay, we're just holding that 3 right there. And then what we're going to do is we are going to use this polynomial, but we're only going to use the coefficients, the numbers in front of our terms. Okay, so what's the coefficient of my leading term? 6. Okay, so I'm going to put a 6. Then I use the coefficient of my x squared, which is negative 19. Then I use the coefficient of my x term, which is 1. And then I use my coefficient of, or my constant term, which is 6. Okay, so the 6, negative 19, 1, and 6, those are all the coefficients of the polynomial that I'm dividing by. Save a line, okay, and then I draw myself a line. So you need to save a space in between those coefficients and the line that we drew. The process is very easy once you get started. Okay, the very first thing you're going to do is this first term is always just brought down. Bring it straight down. Don't change anything about it. And then we take that number that we've got in our half of a box or backwards L or whatever you want to call that. We take that 3 and we multiply it by that 6 that we brought down, and that gives us what? 18, and I put that 18 under the 19. And then I add. Negative 19 plus 18 is going to give me what? Negative 1, and I put that down below. And then I start over again. I take that 3, and I multiply it by the negative 1, and that gives me negative 3. And then I add again. 1 plus negative 3 is negative 2. And then I do it again. 3 times negative 2 gives me negative 6. I add straight down, and that gives me 0. This last number, I always put a little bar there. That last number is going to be your remainder. Okay, in this case, my remainder is 0. Now, that doesn't look like any of the answers that we got when we divided on Thursday of last week, does it? Okay, because we're not quite finished. What we have to do is pay attention to your leading term. You started with an x to the third, right? If you divided by x, then this line right here will be the coefficients, but the highest degree is not x to the third anymore because we divided by 1x. It's going to be x what? Squared. So it's going to be a 6x squared. And then you just go in descending order from there. A negative 1x. And then my constant term is negative 2. And because my remainder is 0, I don't have to write plus the remainder over the divisor. I just leave my answer as 6x squared minus x. Right, again, I'm going to start with my divisor, my x plus 2. I'm going to come off to the side. I'm going to set it equal to 0. I'm going to solve for x. And that number that I get when I solve is the number that I put in my box. Now, here's where we have to be careful setting it up. What's the highest degree term? 1. X to the fourth. What's the coefficient in front of it? 1. So if I started with x to the fourth, then the next one would be x to the third. What's the coefficient of the x to the third? Negative 2. Then after x to the third, what would come next? X squared. Do I have an x squared? No. So just like with the long division, we have to put in that placeholder. So if I don't have any x squareds, what's the placeholder I put in that position? 0. Okay, so I have to add that 0 in there. And then my x has a coefficient of 13, and my constant term is -6. Okay, so go ahead and work this out. Remember, the first term comes straight down. Multiply, add, multiply, add. So you get through the process, and we'll talk about how we write our answer. We multiply, we add, multiply, we add, multiply, add, multiply, add. Did everybody get the same numbers I did? 1, -4, 8, -3? Okay. So this is where we have to start. Look at where we started. We started with an x to the 4th. We divided once. So this is going to be a 1x what? To the 3rd. And then it's going to be a -4x squared. We just go down from there. Plus 8x minus 3. Do I have a remainder I need to worry about? No. And so that's what I get when I divide, and I don't have to do the whole long division process. Like this one better? It's faster, it's easier. Again, it only works with certain problems, so be careful with that. I want you to go ahead and try number 3. It is very similar to number 2. You are missing something, so make sure you put your placeholder in. If you do end up with a remainder, just make sure you put plus your remainder over your divisor. That's what it is before you solve it. Again, the very first thing is we take our divisor, we set it equal to 0, we solve for x to find out what number actually goes in our box. What does x equal? It's 2. Tell me what my coefficients are going to be. 1. Okay. And then, okay, we had to add the 0 in because we were missing an x squared again. Bring down the first term, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. This time I have a remainder, don't I? Okay, so I started with an x to the 4th. What is the coefficient of this 1 going to be for? 1x to the 3rd. How many x squareds do I have? 0. Do I need to write that then? Okay. How many x's do I have? 0. So I don't need to write an x either. And then my constant term, that last one, is going to be -2. But I do have a remainder. So remember, you can either write plus your remainder, which is a negative here, over the x minus 2, which is what you divided by, or you can write it as x to the 3rd minus 2, and then minus a 3 over x minus 2. You can either write plus a negative, or you can write it as minus. But you have to take the remainder and put it over the divisor before you changed it, and that's how you would leave your answer. Anybody have any questions on synthetic division? Okay, now we're going to keep going a little bit. We got a couple other things to talk about, but set up your coefficients. Multiply, add, that's all you got to do. Is everybody okay? Okay. So we are, and don't write this whole thing down. Okay, I'm going to read it to you. We're talking about the remainder theorem here. You are going to be asked to find, okay, I'm going to tell you the important parts. We're going to be asked to find the value of a polynomial when x is a certain number. So what they'll say is p of -4. That means they want you to find the value of polynomial p, that's just what they're calling it, when x equals 4. And then they tell you that the polynomial is here, okay? So we're just finding the value of that function. What does that function equal if x equals -4? And you have 2 options to do this. I'm going to show you the first option, then I'll tell you about the remainder theorem and how to do it from there. So if I say x equals -4 and I want to know what that works out to be, what do you think I should do? What's your first thing? Evaluate if x equals 4 and they give you a polynomial. You just do what with that number? Plug it in. Okay, so we've got our polynomial, p of x. I'm going to put it everywhere there's an x, I'm putting in a negative 4. So it's x to the 4th power, so that's negative 4 to the 4th power. Minus 14 times x squared, but again, instead of x, I'm putting negative 4. Plus 5 times x, but again, I'm putting negative 4. And then minus 3. Okay, first option, if they ask you to find the value of a polynomial when x equals a certain number, you plug that number in and you simplify it out. Order of operations says we got to go through. Is there anything inside any of my parentheses that needs to be simplified? No. So then the next thing would be my exponents, correct? So if I do negative 4 to the 4th power, that's going to be a positive 256. I'm going to bring that 14 down. Then I'm going to do negative 4 to the 2nd power. What's negative 4 squared? 16. And that's all of my exponents. So for right now, I'm just kind of bringing everything else down. Does everybody understand what I'm doing? Okay. So now we got to go through and do all of our multiplication and division, but I don't have any division, so I'm going to do 14 times 16. So that's going to be minus 224. Then 5 times negative 4 is a negative 20. And then bring down that negative 3. And then all I have left is subtraction, so I'm just going to do what it says, 256 minus 224 minus 20 minus 3. And that is going to give me a value of 9. Okay. So if x equals 4, then this polynomial equals 9. And you can plug it in all day long, and that works every single time. But there's also a faster, easier option. Okay. It's called the remainder theorem, and let's take a look at it. What I want you to do is, what value did they tell me x was going to be? Negative 4. So I'm going to put that negative 4 in my box for synthetic division. And then I need to set my polynomial up using my coefficients, making sure I have a position for every term there is. X to the 4th minus 14x squared plus 5x minus 3. What am I missing? I'm missing x to the 3rd. So we're going to set it up 1x to the 4th, 0x to the 3rd, negative 14x squared, positive 5x, negative 3. I want you to take a minute and work through that synthetic division. Remember, we already know what the answer is. The answer is 9. We already plugged in negative 4 into our polynomial. That's the first option you have. Okay, you don't have to do it both ways. You do it whichever way you prefer. Now, if they were giving me x was a fraction, then I would definitely plug it in instead of trying to do synthetic division. However, if x is not a fraction, if it's a whole number, positive or negative, I'm going to do synthetic division. And what I want you to do is once you finish it, look at your coefficients of your answer after you finished your synthetic division. Where is the 9? Think about what it's called. It's called the remainder theorem. Where is the 9? It's the remainder. So you can also use whatever the value is for x, set it up with that as your number in your box, do synthetic division. Whatever the remainder is going to be the value of that polynomial when x equals that number, okay? So again, you can plug it in or you can do synthetic division. Whatever the remainder is your answer. That's why it's called the remainder theorem. Is everybody okay with that? All right, I want you to try this one. Again, you do not have to do it both ways. This time the polynomial is 2x to the 3rd minus 7x squared plus 5x minus 1. They want to find the value of that if x is 3. It's telling you x is, in this case, is 3. That's what goes in our box. It's a 2x to the 3rd minus 7x squared plus 5x minus 1. Multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add, and my remainder is my answer.